Hello, welcome to this special farming-themed edition of Talking Europe. The observant among you will have noticed that we are not on a farm. We are at Paris's City Hall. The reason why we're here is because Paris's mayor, Anne Hidalgo, is one of many dozens of mayors all around France to have unilaterally banned pesticides in their local areas. Well, this comes amid growing worry among the public about the amount of chemicals ending up in our food. There's also wider concern about what industrial-scale farming is doing to the soil, biodiversity, and the climate. Well, in the programme, we're going to be taking you to one chemical-free farm in western France, whose owner says it is possible to drop pesticides and turn a profit. This despite concern from other farmers about their livelihoods and the impact on our food supplies. Later in the programme, we'll also be taking you across the border into Spain, the only European Union state to grow genetically modified crops at scale. 21 years on from their authorisation, what are genetically modified crops doing to our food, to farming and to the economy? We'll be putting those questions to experts as well as the agriculture ministers in both countries. First off though, let's start with this report from Luke Brown and some of France's pesticide-shunning mayors.
Savigny-le-Temple, a small town invaded by a fleet of angry farmers. They're demanding the mayor reverse a local ban on pesticide use near residential areas.
The mayor has decided to suspend the ban. We farmers, we're being stigmatized and we are under pressure.
We have to be able to show that towns like ours can work together with farmers.
A tense meeting saw the mayor suspend the ban, but only for 2 weeks, as well as propose a compromise to use more locally grown produce in school canteens.
Saying that they want to burn down the town hall, that's unacceptable. But I understand their pain. They are victims of a system.
The mayor says she's protecting the health of her citizens. In one small rural hamlet nearby, surrounded by fields regularly treated with pesticides, cases of cancer affect 1 in 10 of the population.
I'm doing it for all of those who have asked me as their mayor, please do something about the pesticides.
The population of Savigny-le-Temple has risen tenfold since 1975. That growth has come as town eats into agricultural land, fueling tensions with farmers. In 2019, the ban on pesticides was a tipping point for France's largest farming lobby, the FNSEA. We met its local leader, Cyril Millard, in October. The anger is a reaction to a perceived threat to their way of life.
Today the violence is in our fields, in our tractors. People don't accept anything anymore. People have ideas about farming that are completely false, distorted.
The threat to the status quo was started by Daniel Lecoeuf. In May, he was the first mayor to ban pesticides in his village in Brittany. Since then, he's been joined by 150 mayors from across France. The French state has overturned nearly all those local rulings, but the movement has shaken the system.
The people in my village, they aren't willing to wait until 2025 or 2027. So in the meantime, we've decided to issue this ban. Faced with a failure of the state to act, it's a local ban that protects our residents.
The anti-pesticide mayors have forced the government to act. In January, it introduced a ban on pesticide use between 5 and 20 metres of residential areas. It's a compromise that fails to satisfy anyone. For the ecologists, it doesn't go far enough. And for the big farmers' union, the FNSEA, it's another land grab by the urban dwellers. Pascal Verriel is a firm believer in the current conventional model. Over the past decade, he's invested heavily in high-tech and high-yield equipment. The new non-pesticide treatment zones will see him lose a hectare of land and part of his income.
Not only is it of no use to me, but I have to keep paying for it. Tax, bills, and there's no compensation.
The farmers' lobby has threatened to retaliate by refusing to recycle waste from sewage plants as fertiliser and leave it to local authorities to deal with.
The towns accuse us of pollution, but we suffer from a lot of urban pollution too. They can't accuse us of all these ills and at the same time ask us to get rid of the city's waste. Both sides have to give something.
That antagonism between urban and rural communities is set to continue. Faced with their bans being overturned by the French authorities, many of the anti-pesticide mayors have announced they will appeal.
Well, and here we are down on the farm in western France. I'm here with Obito, who's a French MEP with the Greens group in the European Parliament and also a farmer right here. Thanks very much for having us.
Merci, bienvenue.
Thank you. Now, you spend most of your time in Brussels and Strasbourg, of course, at the moment, but when you're not there, you're right here farming. What kind of farm is this?
So
the farm here, they only used to grow maize, using a lot of irrigation, and that goes back 35 years, during which time my father was the farmer here. And when I took over in 2007, I changed the thinking behind it. I started raising cows, horses, and donkeys, and they helped bring back prairie and grassland where it is mostly suitable. And as my livestock eat only grass, they're herbivores. Herbivores who eat grass, it's an amazing revolution. On the rest of my land, I grow crops that are dedicated to human consumption. That is wheat, spelt, rye to make flour, lentils, chickpeas. In all, we grow 17 or 18 different varieties that are dedicated to human consumption.
So this is a farm that's completely zero pesticide. We've just seen our report where there are mayors who are imposing pesticide bans. But how do you farm without pesticides and still make a living?
When you study how agriculture works, when you want to remain productive over the long term, you quickly realize that synthetic substances, whether pesticides or synthetic fertilizers, are obstacles to agronomic success.
Do you think that all French farmers, or even all European farmers, should use this model?
Of course, this model can be copied at the French, European, or even global level. Moreover, it's an obligation if we really want to be able to look future generations straight in the eye. Because the agricultural model that has been developed since the Second World War is an agricultural model that is showing its limits, that is reaching a dead end. Productivity is collapsing, and that shows this model is not the right answer when it comes to achieving our food sovereignty for future generations.
It would require massive changes for people in their way of working, what products they're producing. Wouldn't it take quite a long time to transition and perhaps lots of money from maybe the French government or the EU?
This may be brutal for them, but I think we must use public money, which is now being used just to treat the symptoms, not the root causes, to support them in this transition. They have to be helped to successfully adopt this model. And this comes in a context where 1/3 of farmers live on less than 350 euros a month. If we aim for a more environmentally friendly agricultural system, it is also a way of lending farmers a helping hand.
The European Union is updating the Common Agricultural Policy. What changes do you want to see?
The thing is that today public aid is not conditional upon protecting the climate, biodiversity, public health, and therefore a lot of public money is spent on supporting production. But there are no environmental measures made in exchange. That system continues to fuel the agricultural model, and it takes a lot of public money to repair the damage afterwards. Whereas if we go to the root of this system using public money and distribute that money on condition that the practices protect biodiversity, protect the climate, and preserve health, we can make progress quickly.
Obito, thank you so much for being our guest.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, and we'll leave you to carry on with your lovely cows right behind us here.
Magnifique.
Now we'll move on as well with a report from Luke Brown. He's been out to see some farmers who are trying to get to grips with this idea of changing their model of agriculture to move away from pesticides. Take a look.
10 years ago, they were beginners too. Now Florence and Sébastien are passing on their know-how about farming without pesticides.
On your own, you don't amount to much. But even if you want to try to be as independent as possible, it's nice too to think that you need to work with others.
Exiles from urban life, conventional farmers and job seekers. Today's participants are looking for a new start, but success is far from guaranteed.
The first 3 or 4 years are really the biggest hurdle. For the farm to be economically profitable and the system to be viable. It's a long-distance race. You have to be prepared for the long term.
The farm here uses living soil agriculture techniques. That goes further than organic production, using manual labour and natural and traditional methods to eliminate all chemical products. But for the participants, the transition to farming without any pesticides is daunting.
Every time you change the way of doing things, it seems like a risk. And not everyone is ready to take those kinds of risks. and to take a step into the unknown.
After a decade of labour, Sébastien and Florence now grow 60 varieties of fruit and vegetables on their 4 hectares of land, even if scaling up is not a priority.
The way we do things, without using any pesticides at all, it works really well. It's a model that can be copied.
But transitioning to organic is not easy, with higher labour costs and yields reduced by up to 25%. For many conventional farmers, that's a step too far. Sylvie Brunel has studied food production for 30 years. She sees pesticides as essential to guaranteeing Europe's food self-sufficiency.
Conventional food production needs to be protected against climate change and faced with the globalization of threats to agriculture. If organic were to become more widespread, the price of food would increase and we would produce less for higher costs.
Balancing environmental protection with the need to feed a growing population. That's the goal for France's Eco-Phyto programme. It has 1,000 research projects testing ways to cut pesticide usage by half by 2025.
It's innovative in that we haven't just got rid of pesticides, but we've overhauled the entire system. In this experiment, we have reduced pesticide usage by 50%. But that is in our optimal conditions here at the research centre. We can do it, but it's our priority. Many farmers don't have the same priority as we do.
Putting those theories into reality on the ground is the biggest challenge. Jean-Luc Coppenol is one of the pioneers adopting the programme's aims a decade ago. In that time, he's reduced his pesticide usage by 20%, just a first necessary step.
Given that a lot of chemical products will be banned in the coming years, we have to find alternative techniques. People come to us to ask what we've done and how they can do it too.
For many farmers, using pesticides guarantees both their crop and their revenue. Breaking that cycle is a major undertaking, and farmers need help.
The farmers need someone to be by their side, to help them, to work with them. Because sometimes they're worried. They say, if I do this, will it work? That's why it's important for them to be a part of the network. They can exchange what they know.
Progress, though, is slow. French farming is still one of the biggest consumers of pesticides in Europe, and in 2018, sales of pesticides in France increased by over 20%.
We're now at the French Agriculture Ministry with Minister Didier Guillaume. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you very much.
First question then to you. What is your government's position concerning the use of chemicals in farming?
Our agriculture needs to change, to develop, to stay competitive, and research needs to be done to find alternatives to agrochemical products such as artificial pesticides and fertilizers. In the years ahead, we must reduce our reliance on pesticides, and in particular in France, where the use of pesticides will be reduced by 50% by the year 2025. That is what we are committed to.
We spoke earlier with the Green MEP and French farmer Benoit Obito. He told us that it's very important to him that there should be a scheme of training for farmers to help them with this transition. Is that something that you're prepared to put in place?
It is essential to train young people, and the future lies in encouraging young people to enter the farming sector. In Europe in general, and in France in particular, we need to renew the agricultural workforce. And the transition to an environmentally friendly agriculture will not happen without the younger generation. In all the agricultural high schools, there are 800 of them, we train young people in the transition to a greener farming, in management, in the use of less pesticides, in soil rotation, because that is what matters the most.
It sounds like we're talking about a lot of money. To what level should the European Union be contributing to the financing of this transition?
In the negotiation of the future common agricultural policy, the transition to a greener agriculture must be part of it. The eco schemes, which are part of the direct payments, must be really strong, and it has to be compulsory for all states and not optional.
Now, we know that the budget for the next funding period of the Common Agricultural Policy of the European Union is set to be cut. As the EU's #1 recipient of CAP funds, what are the priorities that the French government wants to defend?
So, first of all, an integrated CAP is a common, shared CAP. It is essential, because otherwise the whole system would fall apart. The objective we want is to ensure that all European countries reach more or less the same standards. We want a CAP with a budget and with a functional, multi-annual financial framework. The Commission's proposal is not acceptable today. France is opposed to it, and France will not support the Commission on this. It amounts to a reduction of the CAP's 2 central pillars. And for the moment, at the European level, there are around 20 countries that agree on this. And we want to support the transition to greener farming. And there are 2 key aspects. The first one is economic assistance through the direct payments of the first pillar. And then there is, of course, helping young farmers get a start in agriculture and to set up their farms.
Now, we heard in our report earlier in the programme how dozens of mayors all over France are just unilaterally banning pesticides in their local areas. Many of those bans have been overturned by the courts. So what is the government's position? Do you support those mayors?
No, but this is what we call the non-pesticide treatment zones. France's Council of State, the highest administrative court in France, asked the government to reconsider its decision, saying that it seemed that residents close to farming areas were not sufficiently protected. It also said that measures had to be taken. Our decision will be guided by what the scientific community tells us. We won't be following what mayors or politicians tell us to do. The mayor's choice is to find solutions at a local level, but it is science, it is the French Agency for Environmental Health and Safety that gives its approval when it comes to putting a product on the market. It is not the role of mayors.
Minister Didier Guillaume, thank you very much for your time.
Merci.
Well, it's time for us to move on now, not just from the ministry, but from France altogether. In part 2 of the programme, we're taking you to Spain. That's where we'll be talking not just about pesticides, but also something that's not even grown here in France, genetically modified crops. We hope to see you there.
Fake news. Noun. False stories that appear to be news, spread on the internet or using other media. At France 24, our job is to provide you with information that's been verified. We check sources, we check facts, we sort what is true from what is fake.
At the France 24 Observers, we verify photos and videos circulating online. If they're fake, we let you know and tell you how we spotted them.
In Fact or Fake, we dig into viral stories around Europe to shake out the truth from the trash.
Every day, the Info-Migrants team scours social networks to fight fake news about the reality of migration.
France 24, news based on facts.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.